Hi, everyone. I can't tell. Really? Here we go. Okay, so we're live and we're recording, and thank you all for coming to Discover Your Vision. I'm very excited to be with you here today. What we're going to do is I'm going to tell you the brief agenda of the hour and 15 minutes that we're going to spend together. The first thing is that as soon as I've welcomed you, I would like to hear from you, because a lot of, no matter how much I prepare, it's really what's going on with you guys in the moment that's the most beneficial for this session. Then I want to share a story about myself and the work that I've been doing with clients. I want to debrief and do a little bit of Q&A, after the exercises, we're going to do the Q&A. So we're going to do 3 exercises today. And at the end, I'm going to share my program. So coming from cosmetics, I know that sampling a product is always a great way to sell it. And I do have a program at the end that I hope will feel right for you. But today is a little bit of a sampling of what it's like to work with me. So if that feels right, at the end of today's session, I'll have a little bit of a special offer if you want to join the program. Okay, so again, we're live, we're recording, and here we go. Oops. Okay. So what we're going to do today, it's really hopefully for you a step 1, either in an initial new job search, or it is step 1 of the next phase of where you are in your career, which we have to revisit periodically. So each time you're hopefully going through a process. What we're going to talk about today is an exercise called Peak Experiences, which is really about digging into your past experience to discover clues about what you like to do the most, okay? Then we're going to do Target Mix and Match, which is a bit of a strategic tactical thing about how do you create a job title, a role title for what you want to do next, okay? And then once we focus, and the focus is important in a job search or in a career path discovery, we're then going to actually expand. So the lead mapping, a lot of you guys said, well, I don't know what I want. So the Peak Experiences and the Target Mix and Match are going to help with that. But then you also say, I don't know how to figure out where I can find what I want. So the lead mapping is going to give us the opportunity to get creative and expand once you've really focused in on what you want. And it'll become clearer as we go, hopefully. Let's see, next slide. Okay, so I need to look at the questions. So if you guys, I have the Q&A screen open, and I'd really like to hear from you a little bit about where you are. I see there's a bunch of you on the call, so if you could go ahead and either begin chatting with me, or even better, use this Q&A feature. That would help me a lot. Just start telling me where you are. Anyone who can share? I have the chat box open, so you can go ahead and do that. Okay, so we've got our first, I'm not sure how to decide what types of organizations to target. Excellent. So big, small, nonprofit, etc. And that is a great question. So I'm going to ask you later on today, when we get to the point about the focusing in, you're going to see a section where we talk about our purpose, our skill-based purpose, our experience, and we're going to talk about a box called culture. So will you save that question for when we get to the culture piece? because where we decide to focus is enormously important in the process. So that's a great question. Who else? I have two possible paths, but feel like going for both. I am not doing either really well. How do I decide which one to go for? Great. So two possible paths. This is excellent because we're going to get to a screen a little bit later where I'm going to show you when I said we open up, there's a moment where it is very normal to have anxiety and pressure about feeling like you have to find the exact right job. And I always say, you know, the only person in the world who may have exactly the job that she wants is Oprah Winfrey, because the rest of us really have to go for getting about 80% right. But I promise you that even 70% being aligned with what you love to do and doing it at a place where you really connect with the people and the mission of the organization is an enormous thing. What happens is I like to have people have more than one path and let the final decision be as much a part of who you meet, who are the teams that you meet, do you think you can connect with one, and that helps you make a final decision. Okay, but we'll do that a little bit more later. And then we have one recently laid off, been doing some soul searching and exercises similar to this with an agency that my company contracted. I've revamped my resume and am now narrowing down what I think I want to do. The lead mapping piece will be helpful to me. Excellent. And thank you for bringing up resume, because I want to say this up front, is that resume is a selling tool. And when we get into the focus part, the mix and match focus part, you'll see what I mean by that. I think very often people say, oh, I'm starting my job search, let me send you my resume. And I say, well, your resume is your past experience that your company asked you to do. And while it's really great that you have that experience and you can use it to sell yourself into the right job, it doesn't actually always tell you what you want to be doing next. So we're going to look at how to look at your past experiences in a way that is much, much more, that tells you much more about what you want to be doing next. Okay. Okay, so different career paths. One person just left. There's a vacuum in her job, but not exactly what I want. Possibly there's something related to her departure. So there's a lot going on right now. So, okay, beautiful question. What do you do when there's an opportunity, but it's not exactly what you want? And what I want you to think about later when we get into, we're going to talk about this a little bit later. We're going to talk about a lot. But how do you use your vision and your influence to begin to craft what you could do for an organization if you were given the right opportunity? So sometimes if you can think like the CEO and create an incentive for either your boss or your boss's boss or the CEO, you may actually be able to create a case for why they should change the job for you. Okay, so hopefully we're going to touch on that a little bit today. Great questions, guys. And I want to now, let's see, where did I go? Okay, great questions and a lot of familiar territory with you guys and what I see with a lot of my clients on a regular basis. So what I want to share with you is a little 5-minute story about me. And what's significant about it is that when I started my practice in 2008, I pretty quickly realized that a lot of the people that I thought I was really unique, but a lot of the people that I would be working with had a lot in common with me. So here you see me in around the year 2000. I'm in the Great Wall of China because I had to go halfway around the world to find myself, I guess. And what had happened in this moment was that 9 months before, a month before I had quit my job. My job was at Dior. I was in marketing, launching international fragrances. And 9 months before, we had been launching J'adore, which was the biggest launch they had had in at least 15 years. It was a huge launch across the industry. And for that launch, I got to go business class to France. I went to the south of France, where we went to this launch party with 300 international journalists. It was on this unbelievable estate of an art collector overlooking the Mediterranean. There was dancing, there was amazing food, there was Cirque du Soleil style entertainment, there was an all-white dress code, so you had this sort of ghost-like feeling all over this property. It was the most amazing thing. And it was really one of those pinnacle moments if you're a 20-something woman living in New York trying to have a career. And you can almost imagine what happened next, right? We've all heard these stories where I'm in this moment, and I left the crowd and I went and I looked over the water in the Mediterranean, and I had this very existential moment, and I had this clarity where I said, this is amazing, but this is not what I want, and this is not me. And these are wonderful people. This is a wonderful situation, but I wish I were here in a different capacity. I don't like being a marketing manager. It doesn't suit me at all. Little did I know later that had I come back in much more of an HR role, I would have probably been very happy there. But at the time, it just felt really, really empty. The clarity that I did have was that this was the moment where I would figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So if I look backwards from that moment, and from where I sit today, understanding how many people have gone through a similar moment to mine. I've worked with hundreds of them over the last 10 years. And what became clear to me was that I had done all these great things on paper. So I went to business school, I went to L'Oreal, I went to Dior. And while it was all wonderful and it all looked good on paper, a lot of it were choices that I had made where I made choices thinking about what other people thought. And I abandoned myself in big and small ways along the way. And so what happened was that by the time I was 30, I was barely listening to myself. I had what I refer to as flatlining, where I just didn't feel a whole lot of joy about anything. But I had this fantastic resume and this desirable job and all the rest. So this is what I say about it happens to the best of us, because the best of us looks good on paper, right? But it's when it doesn't feel right that you've got to figure out what the right thing is. So next slide. So this is where really I've heard the story again and again that's very much like my story, where I've checked all the boxes. So why does it feel like the career that I want is just out of my reach? And what I've developed over the last 9 years working with people, where it started, because my story, my personal story, was one of misalignment. I was just in the wrong job function, literally. I was very much into this idea of alignment. So you have to figure out what you're good at, what you do well, and where you have the best impact. So that was really the beginning point when I started working with people. What I also learned as I left corporate America and circled back through my clients is that influence is an enormous piece of it. A lot of us may actually be in a job that we like well enough, but we haven't learned the rules of influence. So it feels like we're constantly negotiating our boundaries. We're constantly feeling put upon. We don't feel like we are at choice about how we spend our time, how we spend our days. And I learned this because, surprisingly, in the second year that I was doing this work, I probably had about 10 people come to me looking to change jobs. And over that year, 5 of those people, instead of changing jobs, they actually did the work that we were doing together. As a result of that work, they gained confidence. They knew where they were good and doing a good job. They started to get recognized at work. Their boss gave them a little bit more autonomy and stopped micromanaging them. And they learned how to deal differently with different people and not always assume that because somebody reacted differently than they did to something, that they must be wrong and back down. Instead, they learned how to graciously and gracefully negotiate their work environment. So between the impact and the influence, and so the end of that story, this little mini case study of 5 people, is that many, many of those people went on to continue at their jobs. They didn't leave. They stayed at their jobs, and they actually got promoted more than one time. So it's possible that if you're out there in the audience and you're convinced that you need to leave, that the same challenges that you have where you are, you will take with you to another organization. And ironically, when I work for organizations, I use this same methodology because I've learned that I can trust it, and that it actually, for organizations, it reduces turnover. So it helps companies retain employees to let me come in and work with their employees on career management and career strategy. Anyway, that was a little departure. But the third piece that I've learned really much more recently, because again, I was so into this idea of alignment, right? That if you are in the perfect job for you, everything will just flow. But what I've come to realize as a small business owner, because I often have to do so much stuff that makes me feel uncomfortable, that there is something very powerful in the just do it. Because I ignored my voice so often, I used to hate that term, just do it, because it sounded to me like just do it means keep doing it even if you're unhappy, and at some point happiness will come, but it never came. What I understand now is that the motor part of learning, which is the doing part of learning, is absolutely critical. And once you have an idea about what you like or what you want, you have to test it out. You have to be willing to get up on the high dive and jump off at the end, right? So that initiative piece is really the third piece that completes the loop. Okay? And the goal of all these is to feel more freedom at work, to feel more recognition. We all need support well into adult life. And then the third piece is that elusive balance, because as we all know, balance is not about how many hours you spend at the office. Balance is about the quality of the time you spend either in the office or away from the office. And it's also about having that sense of control and power over your own destiny. Okay? So today we're going to focus more on the impact piece, but these impact, influence, and initiative, they sort of all live together so interconnectedly that it's going to end up going into the others as well. Okay. Drum roll. So the evidence is there. And I think very often we have this sense that what I want to do next, I don't know what I want to do because I haven't thought of it yet. And I have a slightly different feeling. I said a moment ago that experience, or past experience when it comes to the resume, doesn't have to define us. But in a different way, if you slice and dice your past experience in a different way, it actually reveals a lot about what energizes you, what you do well, okay, and what you would be happy doing going forward. So here, these 3 points are my 3-legged stool, and there's nothing symbolic to the small arrow on top other than that my PowerPoint just wasn't cooperating. But first I have on the top right is assessments. So it's very important and extremely helpful to hold yourself up to other people in the population. Not to compare yourself in a negative way, but to say, oh, well, you know what? I'm an extrovert. Extroverts prefer these kinds of jobs. A lot of people are introverts. I don't have to be like them, but you know, I know that I'm good at this and not that. And there's an enormous amount of freedom in knowing where you stack up next to other people, because then you can begin to define if a society, if an organization, if a group of people or a team needs all types, which type am I and where can I have the most impact? Okay, so very important and very revealing to understand where you are compared to other people. Then on the bottom, I have the 360 feedback from friends and colleagues. And this is a tool I use where people absolutely, this is the most cringeworthy of the tools that I use, because nobody likes to write a letter to friends and colleagues asking for feedback, right? It's incredibly uncomfortable. But the way that I do it is primarily positive. So you're not hearing a lot of the, oh, you could be better at this, that, and the other thing. You're just hearing really positive things like, when do you see me at my best? What do you lean on me for? Things like that. And what that does is that it kind of makes you give up on this idea that you're something else than what they think you are. We all think that, we all have a slightly distorted idea of what others think of us. And when you just hear it from them straight, it's very revealing and very, very emotional for a lot of people. And the third piece where we're going to focus today is the self-reflection. And what self-reflection does is that ultimately it makes you own it. So if an assessment tells you that you're an introvert, not an extrovert, if your friends tell you this, you know, all of that is well and good, but the really deep confidence comes when we can absorb and really believe what it is that we're hearing. Okay? Any questions on this? Happy to. Any questions before I move on? Let me take a brief pause. No questions so far. Okay, I'll keep going. So here's what we're going to do as a starting point, okay? I want you to do with me what I call the peak experience exercise. And this was not particularly new to me. The first time I came across it was with the 5 O'Clock Club, which is a great resource for you guys. I heard recently that they renamed themselves, but they are a job search group. And what I want us to do for the next I'm just going to give you a minute to think about an experience. Don't answer the questions yet, but just think about an experience in your life, a moment or a period of time. It can be personal or it can be professional, where you were really completely energized by what you were doing. You could say that your fingers and toes tingled with it. You were in that state of flow that we hear about. And you were really lost in what you were doing. Think about a moment first, and it might be more than one. My only request to you here is that for the purposes of this today, because we need a little bit more information, I want you to stay away from college or graduate school graduation. And I want you to stay away from vacation unless you can be very specific about describing the nature of that vacation. You know, were you working at Habitat for Humanity, or were you jumping out of an airplane to go heli-skiing? Okay, so no vacations unless you can describe them. And just for today, let's stay away from graduation and those sorts of check the box accomplishments. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and assume that everybody has okay. Okay, so sorry, I was just checking the, whoops. I was just checking the questions. So this experience, when you think back on it, I want you to answer the questions you see here. So what were you doing? Who were you with? And the who were you with can be important from the sense of motivation. Were you motivated by people outside? So was it extrinsic motivation, or were you by yourself and it was really internal motivation? That can sometimes give you clues about whether you belong in a team or whether you belong doing not necessarily entrepreneurial work, but more self-directed work. What motivated you? Similar to the one before. So I guess those are both a similar question. But also with the who are you with, what kind of an environment do you like to be with? And we're going to talk about that in the culture piece later. The fourth question, what did you learn? The fifth question, what role did you play, is very important here. I mentioned a few minutes ago that we're really going more for job role than job title. And if this idea of role is confusing, maybe try thinking about, am I the person who activates everybody and gets them behind a new idea? Or maybe I'm the person who's so good at relationships that when I worked in an international organization, I could make something happen as far as, New Zealand or China by just knowing exactly who to call and having a really good relationship to that person. So think about the role you play within the team. And then the final question, what was your impact? So maybe your impact was that because you got the team going and you activated the team, you actually were able to take on a big new challenge that nobody thought was possible. Your impact, if you're the relationship person, might be that you were able to save a failing project because you knew just who to call and how to save the day. Okay. Anybody would like to share here? This would be a great place to share a little bit. And the Q&A window is working really well. I chose two peak experiences. One was executing and leading a team, and the other was entrepreneurial. So I'm not sure what this means. Okay, thank you. This is a great question, because when you really do this exercise, and I encourage you to go out there and find it's called the 7 stories exercise. When I do it with clients, we focus on 7 stories. And the reason we do that is that you begin to see patterns. And the pattern that you have just articulated really beautifully is in the one you're leading a team, and the other one was entrepreneurial. So my guess, and again, this is a guess on a webinar, with just a little bit of information. So please keep that in mind. But you have a streak that likes to try new things, roadmap. You're probably good at visioning and figuring out where to go next and how to make it happen. So vision and roadmap actually comes quite naturally to you, which is why you're able to be at the forefront of a team saying which direction you think they should go. And also in an entrepreneurial space, you're actually quite adept at figuring out what you need to do next, being strategic, putting one foot in front of the other. Okay, so the impact then is that you can create something out of nothing, which might be a little bit of a broad, dramatic statement, but you're able to kind of craft things and make things happen. Make sense? Okay, so we got another one that says, at this point, I answered those questions. I'm in the right environment, except I'm not fully independent. I'm looking to make a step up, assume more managerial role of sorts. Okay, so for me, there's probably, again, the little bit of, is that there's probably a little bit of an influence piece. How are you selling yourself? How are you positioning yourself to the organization and to the people specifically who are in a position to promote you? Okay, and that's a little bit less of what we're doing today, but it's a really important piece. And again, part of it, that question is, the more you can understand about the impact that you have on the organization, the more you can begin to sell yourself. Okay, so the person who is the go-getter entrepreneur said, haha, I've been told exactly that before. Okay, so we're not, it's not that I'm a genius, it's that these things are really obvious to everybody but ourselves, guys. Okay, all right, I have another one here. I was on an implementation team learning a new software, a new job environment. I love knowing people were relying on me to get the job done. Excited, learn something new and prove myself, go be an expert. Yes, so what I see in you is, number one, a subject matter expert and a person who's very good at the operational people things. So you like being in the middle of the spokes of a wheel, right? And then we have, one of my experiences involves strategic brainstorming sessions with clients and team members. I like being on a team. The other is training, teaching sessions, even though I hate public speaking. Everybody hates public speaking. I teach public speaking and everybody hates it. But it gets easier. I think what it shows is that I like being the expert. I think you like being the expert and you also like being up in front of the room. That's the irony. Or you like teaching a little bit. The teaching role is, can be, hate public, the training and teaching. And the training and teaching can be, again, if we think about roles, you don't have to have that job title to be the person in the room who's teaching everybody and training on what to do. Okay, thank you guys. This is a fantastic little discussion. I wish it could be a little bit more robust, but the webinar doesn't quite let us. Let me just see. Answered. Okay. So I hope that was okay. Maybe you can ask more in the Q&A later about the public speaking and the being the expert. It's the sharing your expertise that's exciting. Okay. So there we go. Now, we're doing a mini version of all of this today. So what I'm going to ask you is to take a deep breath here. I like to do a cat stretch. There's a lot about what's going on outside the four walls, and you probably have a to-do list as long as your arm. You probably have a boss who is wondering what you're doing in the closed room, or maybe you have some kids that are about to descend on you. So try to put all that away for a moment, because we're going to take a little bit of a leap here, which is based on just these one or two experiences that we've just talked about. Okay? I'm going to ask you, yes. Okay, before we go to the job thing, I want to talk a little bit about this idea of impact, okay? The last piece, which was impact, because impact is step one in beginning to sell yourself. So this is something that I use when I do networking sessions, and other people call it the elevator pitch. I call it the impact statement, because I find that while an elevator pitch is just a long laundry list of past jobs, an impact statement basically says, this is who I am, this is what I do, and this is what I can do for you. So a little bit earlier, I told you guys the story of how half of my clients stayed on in the jobs where they were, even though they said they wanted to leave. So when I go to organizations, I say, as a coach with 18 years of multinational cosmetic sales and marketing experience, I help beauty companies retain and motivate their employees. And if I were going to tell you a little bit of proof of this, I would simply say, yeah, many of my clients came to me to leave their jobs, but instead of that, they stayed where they were and went on to enjoy multiple promotions. Okay? So I want you to think about, even though it might feel like a stretch in this moment, when you thought about your peak experience, whether it means you're a go-getter, whether it means, you're at the center of the spokes of a wheel, what do you think the impact of that is on the organization that you're operating in? So if you're the center of the spokes of a wheel and everybody's running around like a chicken with their head cut off, they're experiencing an enormous amount of inefficiency in that organization. But because you stay calm, you build relationships, people trust you, not just for your knowledge, but for your willingness to listen, what you do for an organization is that you reduce the distress, you let people think clearly, and by doing that, you actually increase efficiency, which increases productivity and collaboration. If you are the person who was the entrepreneurial type, who knows how to get things started, what that means is that if you're working in an organization where innovation is critical, let's say technology, or even coming from cosmetics, innovation is critical in cosmetics. They're not necessarily reinventing product types, but they have to anticipate fashion all the time so that they get the most out of a color collection before it goes out of style. So to be the person who knows how to motivate everybody and get them feeling positive when it might just feel like, we have yet another impossible project ahead of us. You're the one who says, no, guys, we can do this. We can rally up. Look, I know how to get us there. That is extremely motivating to people. And, you can go to organizations and say, well, I can help you take advantage of innovation that's coming down the pike. Okay, and make sure that when we do what we do decide to commit to, we do it really well, because we have a very solid roadmap and we know how to execute on resources. Okay. Okay. So next so that was a little bit about impact. And again, we would go much deeper into it if we had more time, but we're moving fast. So focus to define targets. This is a chart that I came up with pretty early on, and it's not totally original, but I have one little innovation that I did, which which if it's the only thing you take away today, I really hope that it's this. So I mentioned on the left, we have experience. And too many of us look at our experience, our skill sets, like, wow, I'm good at P&L. I know how to do, client relationship management. And we use that experience that we've been taught as evidence for what we should do going forward. And what we don't do is the exercise we just did together, which is, did that experience energize me or did it not? I hear a lot of people say, well, the problem is 80% of my job I didn't like, and I can't build a new job description on the 20% that I did like. And I say, well, of course you can, because career is like an onion. If you liked 20% of it, then follow your nose. This is exactly what we're talking about, right? I got to be 34 years old without listening and following my nose. I listened to everything else. You can listen to that 20% and say, what is in that 20%? What can I take from that 20% and deduce about where I'd like to go next? Okay? So what we do need to focus on first is the skill-based purpose and the culture. So one of the things, again, that I learned doing what I do is that people, when they're feeling frustrated or hopeless at work, they say, oh, I want to go into nonprofit. I want to do something helpful for the world. And I often say, you know what? If you go into nonprofit, be very aware that it's a very different type of culture in that world. Very relationship-based. The person who's the entrepreneurial go-getter might feel like it's quicksand and not be that happy. Because what we do is that we confuse purpose with higher purpose. And higher purpose is when you are Mother Teresa or Martin Luther King, okay? That's higher purpose, when you're really dedicated to doing something bigger. We all have that, but for the most part, what drives a feeling of well-being at work is what I call skill-based purpose. So this is what you just figured out about, am I the go-getter? Am I the spokes of the wheel? Am I the teacher? Okay? Or if you guys took the Strengths Finder, which I had sent through in the email yesterday, what are the skills that I most love to use? Because at the end of the day, those will give me a sense of purpose. That's our job description, okay? Our job profile, the role we like to be in, are the top 3 to 5 skill-based purpose, which are basically our strengths. When you combine that with culture, okay, where do I want to do what I want to do? Do I want to do it at a very large organization where there's a lot of politics, but you know what, I'm pretty good at that? Or do I want to do it in a small entrepreneurial environment because I love the spontaneity and the pressure and it's very motivating to me and I love to get stuff done? Do I want to be in an international environment? My background is international. I love multinationals. Or do I want to be in a domestic environment? Do I want to be with mostly men, mostly women, a combination? What industry do I want to be in? So all of those things can feed into culture. And in fact, culture is probably the longest list of anything. And it sounds pretty infinite, but I think if you sit down and you really say, well, where would I be more comfortable? You can begin to piece together elements of culture. Now, what happens, and what we're going to go to next, is that you may decide it's more than one, and that's fine. I think what happens is with your 3 to 5 skill-based purpose or your 3 to 5 strengths, what's going to happen is one job, if you are very good, let's say, at connecting with people, doing research, and closing a deal, you might find that those 3 work incredibly well as an executive recruiter. Again, you love people, you love research, and you love closing a deal. Or it could position you really effectively in real estate as a real estate agent. Okay, 2 very different cultures, but you're using the same strengths that you have. And you might be using them in slightly different, one job might use the first one 40% and the second two 30% each, and vice versa, okay? But it's with these, it's by combining these two, the skill-based purpose and the culture, that you begin to zero in on one or two job targets. The experience, we're going to come around later and use that in both the elevator pitch, not today, but in the elevator pitch and the resume. Okay? Okay. Next exercise. So, again, saying that not again, because I haven't said it yet, but it's important to say this. Saying I'm open to anything is the worst place to begin a job search. Even our friends who know and love us can't really do much for us if all we tell them is, I'm open to anything, you know me, I'm really reliable, you like me, come on, help me out. You have to give them a message. This is what I'm really good at, and this is what I think I can do for an organization. I'd like to do it in this industry. Do you know anyone who works at XYZ? Okay? So first we focus, and then we go broad. So for those of you who don't quite know what you would want to do next, we have this chart, okay? So the upper left is same job, different company. If I'm a brand manager at Pepsi, and I love my job, it's a great job, I want to be here for a long time, I love what I do, but I'm 32 years old, my boss is 45, and he plans to retire in his job, okay? There's really nowhere for me to go here, so I'm going to call up Coca-Cola and say, can I be the brand manager over there? So love your job, you just want to do it somewhere else. Then we have related, and this is where most people who are in a job shift get really the most bang for the buck. So what happens is, let's say, for example, when I worked in cosmetics, I had been on the client side working for Dior and L'Oreal, and I realized that what I really wanted to do was go work for one of the fragrance houses. So that was my vendor, okay? I might have been at the vendor trying to go to L'Oreal or Dior, and that would have been the other way, going to my customer. Or I might have realized, you know what? I actually really like this industry, but marketing is not for me. Where I really belong is human resources. So in the related, you can find a lot of things that, now, for some people, if they say, well, I've worked at, Estee Lauder for 15 years, and now I want to go for a small entrepreneurial company, but doing the same thing, that might be same job, different company, or it might be different enough that it really goes into the related camp. So if you're going from a big organization to a startup, there's a very large learning curve there, and that may, for you, be in the related camp. It just depends on you. On the lower right, we have off the beaten path. And I put this slightly differently in the sheet that I sent you guys yesterday, but try putting something in there that is very low pressure. And sometimes I call this the interview quadrant because, pretty much because you do want to have interviews. Interviews help you clarify what you want. And in that sort of impact, influence, initiative piece, interviews are very, very important in the initiative piece. Whether you are whether you're interviewing outside your organization or doing an informal internal interview where you're beginning to sell yourself to the people who could make a change for you, this is a very important practice, okay? You've got to start talking about what you want. And then on the lower left is the dream job. And what I would encourage you to do here is to really describe this job. Describe the experience of the job, not the job title. Because I've literally had people say, you know what? I'm actually in the dream job. The only thing that I can't stand about this job is that, I've been here for 15 years and I still only have 3 weeks vacation. I need to go negotiate another week of vacation with my boss. And that was the end of the story. So really think about what are the elements and experience of the dream job that you would have if you could. And you may find that within that dream job, you end up finding the answer in something related. So similar to what you're already doing, but a tweak. Okay, I'm looking at the time and I want to do, there's my pitch for the end. So what I want to do is open it up now again for Q&A or input. Go ahead with either the chat or the Q&A and share with the group a little bit about who got a hit from this exercise. What's coming up about either some possibilities or something that's a little bit clearer than it was an hour ago? Ah, I got so much to think about. That's good. That means the creative juices are flowing. Now, I will share with you guys that I am in a very interesting work program, and one of the things that is so clear to me is that when we are lost, afraid, stressed, our creative juices just completely dry up. So when our creative juices dry up, we can't think about what's next. But when we have a process to deal with something as monumental as job search, it actually takes an enormous amount of the stress away. So whatever you do, please find a process, please find some buddies, because having those things reduces the stress and will turn on your creative juices like you can't believe, okay? Okay, so here I have another one. I got an aha. You told me my impact, which I've been told before. Why is it so hard for me to see it? Excellent. You guys, hearing it from other people, and there's a moment where you just can't deny it anymore. Okay? Great. And okay, we got love getting clarity, being precise about what I'm looking for. Yes. Don't feel like if you're being precise, you're asking for too much or you're being picky. Okay? Once you know what you want, it actually opens up much, much more possibility. Okay, I like hearing about not confusing purpose versus higher purpose. I had thought I was getting there to tell myself it's okay to stay corporate. I thought I was getting there to tell myself it's okay to stay. Yes, it is okay to stay corporate. I don't know if that's what you mean by the message. Yes. Hold on. Realized I have to work on the impact statement and the influence I have had so far in my company and how to reposition myself more effectively. Thank you. Fantastic. Yes, and I don't know, to the person about the higher purpose, it is okay to stay corporate because we are serving a purpose within our team, with our colleagues. You know, the goal here is to be your best self and give the best of yourself so that you can have these positive impacts everywhere that you are. Okay, great, thank you, helpful advice. Let's see, I love the idea of describing the elements and experience of the dream job versus the job title. Yes, guys, focus a lot on experience, okay? because even a lot of job titles have an infinite, I don't know, but there's a lot of ways to skin a cat. There's a lot of roads that lead to Rome. And just because a job title says one thing, I've heard the same job title in cosmetics and in fashion, and they mean two completely different things. So it depends on the organization that you're going in, okay? Okay, let's see. What happens when you know it's the same job, different company, but your audience doesn't see it? I.e., your role is product management, but your job isn't. Sounds like a communication issue. Yes, it does sound like a communication issue. And I think it's more in the realm of the influence, right? And yes, the influence does start with, look, this is what I'm good at. You should use me in this way, and you would get that outcome. But it's also about crafting that message, about staying clear with it, not complicating it, and staying very focused with it. Or it could be something else. Knowing your audience and knowing what influences them is a big piece of it. Oh, thank you guys for sending all these. This is so helpful. Okay, we're at 1:29, which is like almost perfect timing. I'm scared. So what we're gonna do, I do want to tell you guys about the program that I have coming up. And it's actually on my website. It just went live on Monday under the Jumpstart Your Clear Strategy Roadmap. And my plan is to do this 6-session teleclass 3 times a year. And I don't have the exact start date on the calendar yet, but I think I'm starting it 3 weeks from tomorrow, okay? And it's going to be every other week. So it's going to go on for 3 months because I think that that's really the amount of time that works best for people. We're going to do 6 75-minute teleclasses. We're going to begin with expanding on what we did today, which is what I call the impact assessment, but it's really understanding what is your impact, where can you make the greatest impact, and how do you sell yourself in that way. Then the target finder, which is pretty much what we were doing today, and the outcome of the target finder is that you do come with 1 or 2 very, very clear job descriptions or job targets. And from there, what that allows you to do is say, okay, I have these 2 job targets. Let me go out and find 30 companies that have the job within my geographic area that I could begin to engage and interview with. And if your stomach just seized up when I said that, I promise you that with research and with tactics, you can find 30 organizations that do what you want, okay? Then we have the brand builder, which is part impact statement, part, really understanding how to step into this role and be the person that you want to project so that you sound and feel credible in the role that you're going for. The 4th piece is once you have all that package, this is where we get into the initiating piece, okay? You've got to activate this by beginning to talk to people. It doesn't mean that your message has to be perfect and you shouldn't jump off the high dive until, you can dive like Greg Louganis. You have to be, don't ask me where he came out with that name. It's been 20 years since he was a diver. Anyway, it's how do you activate that network so that you begin to test your message and your message becomes refined. You learn by networking and you become more clear about what you want to do, okay? And then number 5 is I call the interview strategizer because the interview situation is different from the network situation. And you need to get very clear about how you go in, what it looks like, the 90-second pitch, what you say next, how you close, okay? Because if you walk out of an interview and forget to say, I'd really love to keep this conversation going. Or, you know, I've met with you guys 6 times now. I really think I want to be part of the team. If you don't ask for the next step in the process, then you haven't closed the deal, okay? And then I call it the follow-up winner, just to try to give it a positive spin, because follow-up is one of the hardest things, okay? I've been doing my own business for 9 years now, and I can tell you it's still hard. Follow-up, it's amazing. People don't see your email, they ignore it, you know, they were running to their kids' soccer practice when they read it, and then they never read it again. You have to follow up, okay? And we talk a lot about how to do that. So what we're gonna do in this program, in addition, is that we're gonna have 3 30-minute lunchtime Q&As, because as we go through this program, you can't just, you can buddy up together and you can have each other, and we can do a Facebook group page, but you also need a couple of sessions to make sure you're staying focused and keeping things moving forward. And also when you hit a bump or a moment of doubt, you need to be able to ask your question, okay? And then we have a couple of sort of other related tools. One is that I call the Managing Overwhelm Time Manager, because when you take on a project that is not kept on track by your boss breathing down your neck, it can become very overwhelming to keep it all moving forward. So we're going to talk about time management, and then we're also going to talk about the mindset manager. So there's a lot of work to be done. Some of it is like meditation and more spiritual, but a lot of it is about sense of purpose and how you keep yourself on track when you're doing stuff that makes you incredibly uncomfortable at times. Not all the time, but at times. There's a lot of support that needs to go into that. So I would love for you guys to join me in this. The investment that I'm asking you to make is $449. If you guys want to do it today, you send me an email by the end of today, then it's $399. And if you feel, I'm making this available to everyone who's on this call, if you want a 15-minute power session to talk through it, make sure this is right for you, really understand what you're going to get out of it, then I'm happy to get on the phone with you this week for 15 minutes, okay? And that's it, guys. This has been fantastic. I see, hold on, I see some Q&A. Oh yeah, the Greg Louganis. Yes, indeed, I am dating myself. So that's it. Let me know. I'm here today. Shoot me an email. Let me know what you want to do. And I have loved being here with you. Hold on, one more chat. Thank you so much. All right, thank you guys. This has been so great. And have a wonderful rest of the day. Oh, one more. Thank you for this, Claire. You're welcome. Thanks, guys.